Hi everyone. If you think something looks different, it's because I turned my desk into marble desk by getting this padded mat. And if you're interested, then I'll leave the link below. I got it on Amazon and this is what it looks like. It comes in this simple packaging, says desk pad, NK look, but I'll leave the link below. It feels quite good. It's a good size. It's because it's softer, it's padded, so it kind of feels more comfortable. And I just wondered how it's gonna look as a backdrop. So let me know what you think. Anyway, today's video is going to be about the Daniel Smith Green Apatite Genuine, which is this lovely watercolor. It's from the Primatech range, which is a natural kind of watercolor, as natural as it can be, because obviously they have to add some binders and to create the pigment, but it is a real rock or a stone that is taken and ground up and then created into pigment. So I was quite interested to swatch it out today on different papers, and the one that I already have seen is this swatch, and I wasn't too keen on it. However, I have used it since a few times and I actually really liked it on other papers. So I thought, let me swatch it on different papers today and get you to see what they look like. So first I'm going to start on this Moulin de Roy smooth. So it's a hot pressed paper, which generally I do not use, but this is the paper that I purchased for botanical art, and I have a little piece of it, so I want to see what it looks like on smooth paper because it's a very strongly granulating watercolor. I wonder what how the granulation will look in that sense. So I've got some of this color squeezed out here in my portable painter right in the corner. I'm going to use my Jackson's Art quill brush 10-0 because it's I don't know, I've just been using it a lot lately and I really enjoy it. It feels quite good in my hands, so I'm just going to put it there. And let's start with this paper. So the other thing to say is, if you're going to use this watercolor, I don't know all about other Primatech watercolors, but this particular one, well, I only have one Primatech watercolor, but this particular one, basically, once you wash your brush out in a water jar and you let the water sit a little bit, you look into it and it looks very strange. You have this strands of kind of pigment floating around, and then some of it settles at the bottom, but mostly it's just like floating pieces of seaweed, it looks like. But anyways, so I'm going to start by wetting my brush and then just going into the watercolor. When it dries, it seems to dry very, very hard, but it does revert really easily, so that's a good thing. So I'm going to use this to begin with, and I'm not going to do the wet on wet technique. I'm just going to do some swatches so you can see how strong this color is, and immediately there is granulation happening already. So I'm going to do it like that, and then I'm also going to do a little bit of gradient, and it is advised not to play around with watercolors for too long, so I'm trying to do that. So here you go, you can see the granulation and the pigment separation. But I'm going to let them all dry and go back to them. It's quite beautiful to see how the pigments kind of are colliding together and then spreading the rest of the area around them, and it's a really, really interesting way, the way this watercolor behaves. So to give you some information about this watercolor, it's a series 3, so it's quite expensive because it is a Primatech anyway. all of the Primatech colors are quite pricey, and its lightfastness according to ASTM is 1, so it's perfect, it's excellent, the best you can get, so that's great. We're going to do some transparency tests as well. I mean, it is obvious that it's a super granulating color, so we don't need to have any further questions on that. You can see how it separates into this kind of like a grayish color and like a warm toned gray with a very kind of bright green, like a spring green color. And then, so I'm going to let it settle over here. Next paper I want to use is the Cadi paper. So it's the Cadi papers, and the one, this sketchbook is the 210 GSM, and it's a smooth one. I actually didn't know that they had other varieties of the textures until just now, when I went into my drawer and pulled out different sketchbooks, and I found this old sketchbook which I have. I mean, it's a very beautiful landscape, very thin and long shape. I don't know if they're still available because I bought this ages ago, and it is a Cadi as well, if I show you at the back. And this one actually says rough, so it's also 210 GSM, but it's a rough, and there is actually a big difference in the two papers, so I just want to show you quite quickly. So this is the smooth, this one, and then the one on top is the rough, so you can see the texture a lot more vividly. There we go. So we'll see what this looks like. So this is my swatch book, which I use to do all of the swatches. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to do a regular swatch like I always do. Just going to make sure I don't have too much water. Go back into the green Apatite Genuine, and as you can see, it's a very dark color. When you first swatch it, it's like muddy forest green. So I'm just going to do about half of it, like so, and then I'm going to wash it out, make sure I really don't have that much water, and then just let it flow. And the more I go back, the more I'm going to separate the pigments and create that unpleasant look, which I don't want to do. So I'm just being very careful for this swatch not to go back into the original color. So I'm just going to write down the name. And that's what it looks like on this paper. I'm going to go back at the end, and I will show all of the swatches once they're dry, because it makes a big difference. So here I've got the rough, so it's the Cadi papers 210 GSM rough. So let's see how different it's going to look on this paper. It's great for dry brushing because you can see the lovely textures. It almost looks black on camera. So I'm just going to try and pull out the pigment a little bit. I'm very tempted to go back, but I'm scared that I'm going to separate them. But anyways, let's risk it for this one. So here I've got the Arches 300 GSM. So this is a rough paper. Arches tends to make all watercolors so beautiful and bright. So let's have a look. I'm going to make a nice big swatch. Wow, granulation is already, as I just lifted my brush, already started getting quite strong and visible. So I'm going back. You can see when I'm going back, I'm moving that pigment that way, that grayish kind of pigment. I'm going to do another swatch just for my own interest. So the first one I worked backwards, and the second one I'm going to do just one direction, so I'm not disturbing the watercolor. Finally, I've got some cheap paper here. So this is a sketchbook from Dalla Roni. So this is the 160 GSM paper, and it's not, doesn't, you know, obviously it's a thin paper, so it's going to buckle. It doesn't take watercolor, too much watercolor too well, but for this sort of purpose of swatching, it's absolutely fine. Okay, so I'm just going to, so this is where I'm doing the transparency test. I've got a nice black line here, and then I'm just going to go back and make a bit of a mess here, but anyway. So I'm going to let that dry as well. Here is the first one we did today. You can see that just doing the first swatch, you can hardly see any texture or granulation there. It's just very dark, very strong. However, if you want to play with the granulation and let the watercolor be natural, then that's the effect you get right here. I find it a lot more interesting on this paper than it was in this. This is, by the way, the Stillman and Byrne Better series sketchbook. So it's got good paper for watercolors, but some watercolors behave different on this paper. So that's that. So this is the second one right here on the Caddy papers, 210 GSM, and it's the smooth one. So quite strong, didn't do too much of that two pigment separation, kind of dried quite nicely. You can see how pale you can get it to be versus the very kind of dark and strong color. The granulation is quite nice, however not as visible as on the other papers. Then we have the rough Caddy paper, and there you get to see the beautiful granulation very, very strongly. So it would be beautiful to paint leaves and foliage with this watercolor because it creates that texture. And then here we have got the arches, and the swatches are quite different. As you can see, there is more of the settling and separation of the pigment in the first one, because the first one I went back and kind of disturbed the watercolor a little bit. The second one I just went one direction, so I didn't go backwards, and that resulted in a different granulation strength. And finally, let's look at this Dalla Roni paper, and it doesn't look too attractive here. So it starts to look a little bit like it did on this paper, where it's quite strong in terms of separation and looks a little bit messy. You can see even on this paper, when I have gone a few times over it, it still looks a lot more interesting. So with this paper, it seems that the higher the GSM and the rougher the paper, the better it looks. But that's in my opinion. Obviously everyone has different needs and style requirements. So before I go, I just wanted to show you a few combinations. Now, I have not tried mixing this watercolor with too many others. I've tried it with a few yellows, which I said I didn't really like. So this was the Indian yellow and quinacridone gold, and it could be the case that and the reason I don't like it might be because of the paper, like I mentioned before, but I have tried it since with some blues, and I found it quite beautiful. Actually, speaking of which, I just want to show you something from my sketchbook where I used it on the cacti. So this is when I used the this green Apatite genuine with a bit of indanthrone blue, and it just looked so gorgeous. And I mixed it in some other places as well. So it's quite beautiful color once you mix it with darker blues. But let me show you. So I'm going to grab just a little bit of this color. It dries extremely fast. I was just obviously working with it and it's already dried, so I'm just going to put a little puddle over here, and into this puddle I'm going to put a touch of indanthrone blue and show you how beautiful this color is. So here is this color with the indanthrone blue. I'm just going to do swatches. I'm not going to do any gradients. Just want you to see what beautiful colors you can get, and then also while we're at it we can see the granulation, how that's going to work. So let's go into here and mix this one with the cobalt blue. Very pretty as well. Gorgeous color. In fact, this is like a you know, when you paint glass bottles or something like that, or water, that color is beautiful. And let's mix it with let's see, I haven't actually tried this Mijello Peacock Blue, which is phthalo blue basically. So let me try with this phthalo blue and see how it's going to look. Phthalo blue is a very strong color, very dominant, very pretty color. Well, while we're at it, let's try actually this green Apatite Genuine with a phthalo green, and see what color we get here. So that's with all my blues. Okay, so now I want to try actually mix this color with some of my greens. So let's try this side and this side. So we've got a nice amount of green Apatite Genuine, and now I'm going to go with the Winsor & Newton Permanent Sub Green. It's a nice color, and just to show you what the sub green looks like on its own, that's the sub green on its own. So it kind of turns it down a little bit. And then let's try Daniel Smith Green Gold with this color. Should be a nice mix. Yeah, that's a beautiful color as well. And I'm going to show you what the green gold looks like on its own as well. So it's a lot more yellow. And brighter. While I'm at it, I'm actually going to mix up lemon yellow with, that's beautiful. So that's lemon yellow with green Apatite Genuine. It looks so much better on this paper, or any paper, I suppose, that would have texture. And now I'm going to do this one. Wow, that's a beautiful color, which is Indian Yellow with green Apatite Genuine. So let me just swatch. That was lemon yellow, and this was Indian Yellow. Okay, well, that's quite pretty. And on top, actually, I'm going to swatch these colors here, which I was using. Basically that gives me a nice reference of what color I mixed. So I'm starting to see some strong granulation in these three colors, so I'm going to quickly blast dry them and come back and show you. Okay, so now they're all nicely dried. So there is the granulation present and the pigment separation present in most of the swatches, so I'd say that probably these four and this one is the strongest one that I can pick up on. These three are quite granulating, but I can't see the pigment separation there as strong. So let's have a little close up. So I think it's a very beautiful color to have in your palette as a mixing agent, because quite often Primatech watercolors, they're so precious because they're made out of genuine rocks, and that they are just beautiful on their own, but you can actually create some very interesting mixes, and that's just with you know, very limited colors that I have in my portable painter. So basically mixed out all of these bottom ones with these two, but these ones I didn't, and there is a huge variety of other watercolors you can mix it with.